Well, welcome everyone to our spring 2025 autism training series sponsored by Aetna Better Health of Kentucky in partnership with the Kentucky Autism Training Center. My name is Andrea Polk and I am the Children's System of Care Administrator with Aetna. This is the first training in our spring series and we appreciate your attendance. A few housekeeping tips before we get started. Please remain on mute and place any questions or comments in the chat, and those will be answered at the end of the session. There will be a resource folder link placed in the chat, and this will contain the slides from today's training. It is important that if you need a CEU for a licensure board or a training certificate for foster parents or as a DCBS worker, you will need to complete the survey at the end of the training. And that survey link will be placed in the chat at the end of the training for you all to complete. Be prepared that some of the CEUs are still pending, and so you may not get all of your CEUs until the end of the training series because we do still have 3 more trainings coming up. So now I would like to introduce our presenter for today. This is Enid Hurtado-Stremming, who is a school-based field trainer with KATC, who will be training on Autism 101 in 2025.
Thank you so much, Andrea, for the introduction. One thing I just wanted to add, if you have any questions during the presentation, please use the chat window. Heidi will be on the other side, and if there's any questions she can answer, she'll type it into the chat. If not, if it's something that she thinks that we should discuss a little bit more, we will wait till the end of the session to look at questions and answer them. So thank you for your patience, and definitely ask questions, make comments. We'd like this to be as interactive as possible in the chat window. All right, so I'm going to get started for time-wise. As you can imagine, an Autism 101 session can have a variety of information. I can talk about autism all day long. I could probably talk about it actually all week long. There's so many topics, so much information that we could dive into. So what we're going to cover today is um, a topical coverage overview of what has been found to be important of an autism in 2025. Okay, so there may be some information that you are aware of that you know about. That's great. I may put a little bit of perspective. I may be building upon some of your knowledge, and then there may be some knowledge that you're not aware of. So that's what the goal of this session is, for you to learn about what we know about autism in 2025. Some of it is based off of some, like the DSM-5 was in 2013, but even the interpretation of it has let me say, evolved so that we actually have learned a lot more interventions that can help with some of the diagnosis criteria. And so we'll talk about that too. And then just there's going to be a lot of resources. So I just want to give you an overview of what we're going to do. And just know that we will follow this up with other sessions based off of your questions and interest. So I will provide an email that you can email us at the end of the session. And with that, I'm going to get started. All right, so the first thing I'd like to share with you is the resource folder. I will point out some of the resources that build upon the information in this presentation, but there's also going to be information in there to help guide you and build your knowledge about autism after this session. So definitely, if you are a person who can use your phone, take a picture to access the QR code, and you can look at resources while you listen, great. If not, don't worry. Heidi will be putting the bit.ly or the link to this folder a few times during the presentation so that you'll be able to just copy and paste it somewhere else or be able to access it later. All right, so we're going to start off with the prevalence. Okay, the prevalence of autism in the United States, according to CDC, is 1 in 36. Okay, I'm sure most of you are pretty familiar with that number because it is based off of information um, collected in 2020, and then it came out in a report in 2023. The part that people I don't think realize, though, is that this is a voluntary action by the states, meaning that they do not have to turn over their statistic information about autism to the CDC. And so this information is based off of 11 out of the 50 states in the United States. So the question I always ask people is, do you think the prevalence is higher, meaning that there are more children um, than than this number represents? Or do you think it's lower, meaning that there's not as many children with autism? What do you think? Go ahead and put it in the channel chat. So like, do you think it's 1 in 30 or 1 in 25, or do you think it's 1 in 40? So is it high? Yes, exactly. And I use if we had more time, I'd ask you to introduce yourselves and tell me where you're at. But like I said, we have so much information to cover. But yes, I am pretty sure that whether you are a foster family and you have your support groups, or you're a professional and you're seeing the type of children and adults that are coming to you, you know that the prevalence is definitely a lot higher. So we will see in the next CDC assessment what it's going to be. One thing, oops, and that I forgot to show you on the previous slide, and for some reason this is blocked on my screen to be able to go back. Um, is that in you will receive this presentation as a PDF within the resource folder. The reason I tell you this is because I've included links to resources, videos, and anything that you're going to see today. One of the first ones I want to point out is at the top left corner, you see this person reading a book. This, if you click on it, this link will take you to the CDC website. They have revamped their whole website for autism starting, I think it was the beginning of last year. Some of the websites can be translated into different languages. Some of them have resources that you can order, like they have some books, some developmental books. So, and it's for the whole range. So it used to be very dry. The CDC website on autism was very dry. It was just the data and how they collect information. Now it's very user friendly. It has a lot of information and resources about from developmental to school age to then beyond school age. So definitely check out the CDC website to see what resources may be available to you and helpful to you. So that's at the top left corner. It'll take you straight to the autism part. Okay, the next resource that I'd like to share to make sure that everybody knows about is KY Spin. Um, some of you may have heard of this resource before. Many people don't realize that it is federally mandated for every state in the United States to have a parent group that supports parents of individuals with special needs through the whole lifetime process. Okay. So ours in Kentucky is called KY Spin. Um, just you can in the PDF, you can just click on that blue link. It'll take you to their website. You can see just from the tabs, it has a lot of different resources in it. They even have mentors, parents who volunteer to be mentors for new parents of children with special needs. Because it's covering the whole disability spectrum, you may need to look for those that are specific to autism, but because autism is not the only, sometimes there's co-occurring disabilities, it's always good to have a resource that has, multiple ones in there. So definitely make sure that you access the KY Spin if you are a caregiver, and if you are professionals, of course, you work and you're working with children or their caregivers, please make sure that they have access and even explore it with them so that they know what will be the most helpful to them. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about that diagnosis of autism that I mentioned earlier. So in summary, autism is a neurological disorder that is typically diagnosed by the age of 3. But, if the child is taken in earlier, or you can get them in, because I know many of you who are caregivers were on a waiting list, and then practitioners, you hear about this. They can be even diagnosed earlier than that. And the three main categories are social interactions with others, communication with others, and a range of behaviors, interests, and activities. Now, keep in mind that the diagnosis of autism, and now we're not gonna dive into this part. I just wanted to show you what the DSM is when a child gets or an individual gets the diagnosis of autism. What are they basing it off of? This is based off of the DSM-5, which is like the Bible of the psychology field. I know for those of you who are in that field, the mental health field, there is a DSM-7, but from that book is not as easily accessible as a DSM-5. And looking into it, there's only a few words that have changed, and nothing like the last time DSM-5. So if you would like to have a copy of this, I put this in your resource folder. Okay, so you can see the copy of the diagnosis. You can also click on this link right here, so you can see what it is. But uh, One thing I want you to notice is, and I even italicized it, is that a lot of the description is describing the characteristics as deficits. Okay, this is not a strength-based description, which I think that influences the way we talk about autism. Just know that the whole purpose of a diagnosis is for the individual to be able to access services. Okay, that is the whole purpose of it. And so, because that is the main purpose, that's why it's described in a deficit wording. Right. So, just keep that in mind as you talk about autism, especially with the individual who has autism. Try to focus on strengths. Okay, but know that the diagnosis, and even let them know, it's just important to be able to access the services that they need. And we'll talk more about that in a moment. So here's, the next page. That first one, it was all of them, right? That here's next one is at least two of the following. And so this one doesn't use the deficit wording, but it does describe more of behaviors. One thing to keep in mind too is that, and probably a lot of you know this, but I'd like to make sure that people know when I'm talking about the wording, is that if you're reading the whole description, you're not going to see anything about Asperger's, right? That was changed in 2013. It became the large autism overarching word uh, description of autism, and only that. There used to be a couple of others that were proximate to autism. They have similar characteristics, I should say adjacent to autism, but they were not autism. And remember, I told you about the services. So what they found, what was happening, is that the individuals diagnosed with Asperger's or any of the others that were similar to autism were not receiving the amount of services that they needed, because people interpreted that as they didn't need as much. And so then in 2013, the diagnosis just became autism, and it included all of the other diagnoses that were adjacent to autism in earlier versions of the DSM. So just, a lot of people ask, well, why is there more numbers, or what happened to Asperger's? Well, that's what happened. It's all about the services and enabling the individuals to access as many services as possible, especially early on, or especially early intervention, since we know from research and anecdotal, for those of us who have been in the field for a long time, we know that when students receive, or I'm sorry, when children, Andrea told you I'm coming from the school, so that student's word comes out of my mouth, but that when individuals receive early intervention services, they have more progress the older they get. That's not to say that they won't progress at all. It's just that when the earlier the better. And that goes, across the field for any child. All right, one thing I want to call out to, that I think the understanding of this part that came out in 2013 has really been, I don't think it was very well understood when it came out in 2013, so people didn't focus on it. But the more brain imaging we have, the more information we have from self-advocates. Self-advocates are adults A lot of them were in the schools starting in the 90s when that first explosion, quote unquote, explosion of autism occurred. I know some people right now are saying, right, like we identified with the prevalence that there's a lot of individuals with autism right now coming through the system as young children. So they would say there's another explosion occurring right now. But in 2013, when this aspect of it was added, okay, so this was not part of the diagnosis before 2013. This became part of the diagnosis in 2013. I don't think there was enough knowledge about it, except for if you were an occupational therapist who was trained specially, especially in sensory processing disorders or challenges. That a lot of us who were teachers, mainstream practitioners, parents, we didn't really know a lot about what this meant. Okay, we knew that kids were sensitive to sounds. I mean, we knew what it looked like, but what do you do? Okay, well, with the way that, like I said, with the information that has come out, with more research and more ability to be able to see how the brain works. So we know a lot more about the brain. We can see it, right, with all of technology that has occurred. And like I said, with the information from self advocates, which are the kids out of the 90s who have taken upon themselves to advocate for others that have autism, including themselves, of course, but that have shared with us what it was like to go through school. What was the environment like? What was their interpretation of the environment? How did their body feel? How, when they were sensitive to sound, what did that mean? When they were stimming, what did that mean? So I'm going to play two little videos about this, just to kind of get us all on the same page when it comes to senses. So at this point in 2025, it is accepted that there are 8 senses, okay, that can be affected if you have this type of hyper or hyporeactivity. Most of us learn about the 5 senses, okay. Some of us may know about 2 more, and then the third one may be the newest for a lot
We
of us.
have 8 senses. 5 you have probably heard of: sight, sound, smell, taste, and touch. And 3 that you may not be familiar with: the vestibular sense, sometimes known as the gravity or balance sense, allows us to move smoothly. It helps us with balance while we walk and run, and to stay upright when we sit and stand. Proprioception is the sense of self movement, force, and body position. It is present in every muscle movement you have. Without proprioception, you wouldn't be able to move without thinking about your next step. Interoception helps you understand and feel what's going on inside your body. For example, when you're hungry, thirsty, in pain, or need the toilet. Imagine for each of our 8 senses, we have a cup. And for us to feel regulated, each cup needs to be full. Each time we get some sensory input for one of our senses, it fills up the cup a little. For each sense, some of us have big cups and some of us have small cups. Imagine you have a small cup for sound. It fills up quickly with a little noise, and any more can feel overwhelming. Imagine you have a big cup for proprioception. You will need lots of movement to feel regulated. Understanding someone's sensory profile is really important in order to know what they need to feel, learn, and perform at their best.
Okay, that's great. Oops. All right, so hopefully that helps you understand a little bit more about the senses, the 8 different senses. Now you can see that there's another video over here to the right. I'm not going to play it, but it's in the PDF of your presentation. It's 7 minutes long, and I recommend that you play it to then understand how behavior is affected when someone's senses are dysregulated. Now, this is not just an autism thing, though. I mean, I think probably some of you, as you were watching this video, you're thinking like, oh yeah, like I have really good hearing and I can hear things that other people can't. Or maybe you have really sensitive smell and some perfumes can be overwhelming, even make you feel ill, right? And we just say, oh, it makes me feel sick or it overwhelms me or like, oh, just grosses me out, right? For in practical language. But really what it's doing, it's causing your body to be overwhelmed and dysregulated. Now, all of us, our body learns how to regulate our so that when we become overwhelmed, or for those of you who drink caffeine in the morning, I'm in that category. If you are hypo in the mornings and you need that little pep, we regulate ourselves to get us back, to get us up into our alert and calm mode, like ready for the world mode, by maybe drinking some coffee. Maybe some of us take a walk, or, a walk outside to get that cool, brisk air. I mean, all of us have different interventions that we use upon ourselves to self-regulate and make it through the day to be successful. Well, when you have a hyper or hypo system that can become hyper or hypo throughout the day, then you need a lot of these type of interventions. And kids with autism and some other neurodiverse conditions as well, who or have sensory processing challenges, may not know what to do. And so what may happen is they start to cope. And so they like to hold it in, like just deal with it attitude, which I know a lot of us probably learn to do. But with somebody who has a system like this, it's not going to help them get through the day. Eventually, their coping systems will become exhausted. And then that's when you get the behavior of either fight, flight, or freeze, right? Fight, I think we know what that looks like. It could be pretty extreme. Flight, that'd be escaping, from running around, running away, and a freeze where they just curl up in a ball and in any of these states, they can't hear anything you're saying. They can't react to what you're saying. They can't answer your questions. Okay, so this is definitely a really important part of understanding autism, and we know this more than we ever have in 2025, and realizing how the environment and the lack, and because there can be a lack of communication, even if a child is verbal, right? They may not know how to ask for help or share what's going on. I mean, it's not, they can't even describe what is happening in their body as sad, mad, angry, right? Those words really don't describe it. It's really how their body's feeling and how it's making them feel, even maybe taking the ability to come up with words away. So this is a big, big passion of mine. I talk about this with everyone because I feel like this is a really foundational piece of knowledge to understanding individuals with autism. Although we're going to talk about other things, I will give you some more information about it at the end that you can learn more about it. So this is actually tied to an evidence-based practice at Kentucky Autism Training Center. Everything that we talk about is tied to evidence-based practices. Okay, something, and specifically practices that EBPs or evidence-based practices that have been shown to be effective with individuals with autism in different age groups. Okay. In fact, I'm going to share with you a little bit later a resource where you can see all the evidence-based practices and learn more about them. But one of the newer ones that was added in 2020 to the list was the AIRS sensory integration theory. And I'm not going to get into it, but basically what it says is those senses that we just talked about it, when they are regulated and in balance, and somebody is self-regulated, so they're at a good level, and here they call it normal state of arousal, they're able to do all of these things over here to the right: planning and organizing, inhibition and impulse control, attending behaviors, working memory, task initiation, self-monitoring. Okay, I will tell you right now that when I'm in the schools and teachers share with me some of those concerning behaviors around students, this is what they're usually talking about. They have a hard time starting the task. They're all over the place. They're running around the classroom. They, or they're, screaming, yelling, kicking. I mean, there's different, but a lot of them are tied back to this. Because as you can see from this graphic, a lot of the senses, the balancing of the senses, or self-regulate, or the regulation of the senses, has to do a lot with how our body functions successfully. Okay. And so, again, this is for all of us. This is for all of us. But if we don't have a sensory processing disorder, our body learns how to self-regulate itself pretty successfully. But if you have a overreactive or underreactive system, you're constantly you can be constantly in this struggle if you don't know how to either avoid the triggers, right, that can cause your system to be imbalanced, or you don't know how to react to it, how to self-regulate. So this is a really important part of autism, and understanding their functions, and importantly, teaching them how to talk about it with their caregivers, their teachers, and everyone who's there to support them. All right. So that said, I'm going to show you another video. This is George, okay? And he is a fourth grader who created this video for his fourth grade class. And I'm not going to play the whole thing, I'm just going to play a part of it. But I want you, as you're watching it, to identify, or, write it down or keep in mind what he identifies as being part of his autism. Okay. And then as you identify it, feel free to put it in the chat window and let the others know what you heard. Okay.
I didn't speak until I was almost 3 years old. In fact, my parents weren't sure if I would ever speak at all. And we all know how that turned out. This is Geometry George here, or Geo for short, and we're going to talk all about quadrilaterals and how they're the most of the time, I can make eye contact with you when you speak to me. That wasn't always the case. Like a lot of other kids with autism, I might not have been looking, but that didn't mean I wasn't listening. Speaking of listening, I can hear and see a lot of things and sounds all at the same time, which sometimes makes it hard to focus on any one sound or thought. That's why it may take a little more time to answer you when you ask me a question. I also tend to take what people say literally. That means if you say, take a seat, you might find one less chair in your classroom. If you say it's raining cats and dogs, I might think, oh, I'm getting a puppy. If you say fall is coming, I might plop to the ground. If you say I'm so hungry I could eat a horse, I might get a little nauseous. If you say play music by ear, I might easily bang my head on a piano. If you say keep your eyes peeled, that's just gross. So if you're very specific when you talk to me, everybody wins. Let's talk about my senses. I love to touch and feel different textures and temperatures. Not all kids with autism like touching or being touched, but I do. I don't like yogurt. I don't think that has anything to do with my autism, but the fact that I can smell it from across the room, yeah, that probably does. I'm extremely enthusiastic about a lot of different things. Sometimes when I get very excited about something, I flap my hands or bounce up and down, or as you may have already noticed, I sometimes get frustrated when I get interrupted or when something doesn't go as planned, or when something unexpected happens, or when I make a mistake, or when I don't get called on, or when I'm
Keep going.
but I messed up.
I know, that's okay. Keep going.
Or when I don't get a turn. Those last two are just kid things to be frustrated about, and I'm a kid just like you. Because all us kids are different in our own ways, right? Sometimes I get so frustrated that I get more upset than most people would, for longer than most people should. I might get too loud, or I might scream.
Okay. Okay.
Look down.
I love you.
Okay, so we're gonna stop there. I know probably many of you are like, what happens? Let me watch. You can watch this video. It's linked on here. But let's see in the chat window what's some of the characteristics that you heard George identify. Let me get to the chat window. Or if Heidi, if you want to mention some.
Absolutely. So everything from meltdowns, eye contact, proprioceptive regulation, very literal, sensory, specific interest, communication challenges, social interaction challenges, specific interests, nonverbal until 3, and trouble with eye contact were some of them that were listed, Enid.
Okay, great. Yeah, you guys were paying attention. Awesome. And that really highlights, right, uh, what a spectrum it is for him and how much he's grown even since he was very young. You heard that they never even knew if he was going to end up being able to be a speaking child or if he would just stay non-speaking and need to have a communication supports. So, he also mentions the yogurt. When you watch it again, I've watched that video many times. So he talks about his senses, how he can, he doesn't like yogurt, doesn't think it has to do with autism, but the fact that he can smell it across the room may have something to do with it. So these are just characteristics to keep in mind when you are with individuals with autism, okay, that if they don't want to do something, it may be something that is averse around them. Definitely checking about their senses. It could be to do with language. Like someone mentioned, he is literal. It's also, he mentions as that one picture where he's surfing, that he says, if everybody uses specific language, everybody wins. So, and that's a really big key. Okay. A lot of people in our culture, we have a lot of idioms, right? We have a lot of references to things, analogies. And even though there may be some individuals with autism who completely understand that. And of course, the older they get, they understand that. But especially when they're young, that may be very challenging for them because they're taking everything literally and they may not have that knowledge base of those clumps of words, right? And we know that there's the other term is gestalt, right? Where they're clumping for a meaning. So that may not be part of the vocabulary yet. So just checking for comprehension, understanding. And then that one scene where he is screaming at the top of his lungs in his teacher's lap, we're going to talk about why that may be happening in a moment. But yeah, just, keep in mind that it varies. Even this whole spectrum can be in one person, right? That it can vary. Um, so what we're going to talk about today towards the end are some resources that can be applied with any level. Probably most of you know at this point that we don't use the psychology verbiage of high functioning or low functioning. For autism, it's specifically, we use level 1, level 2, and level 3, and you can see what the differences are. Level 1, all of them requiring support. Remember, the whole point of the diagnosis is to get through your services. So all of them describing what type of supports the individual may need, and they can change levels. From when they're very young and they may need more support to as they're growing and learning skills, they may move from a level 2 or level 3 to a level 2 or even a level 1. So it just depends on what kind of services that they need. Okay. There was one more thing I was going to say about that, but I don't remember it right now. So I may come back to that slide, but I'm going to keep going because of time wise. A lot of people may have questions about the medical diagnosis versus the educational eligibility at schools, right? So just because you have a medical diagnosis doesn't mean that you necessarily will qualify for services at school. There's always going to be an educational eligibility, which is why then there's IEPs or the ARC meetings. And so it is definitely different. What we looked at earlier in this session is the medical diagnosis, right? In fact, you can see I put a link to the whole DSM-5. So if you want to look at to see what that book looks like, you can actually download a PDF of it from the CDC website, but I did that for you and I put it in your folder so you can see like some of the other diagnoses that are close, a lot of communication disorders. And then educational eligibility, there's a federal, right, description that's in the law, but then states are able to interpret that law. And so I did put the Kentucky ASD guidance document that came out a few years ago. They updated it. So if you had an older one, this is the updated one, which will explain to you how Kentucky schools and other, eligible preschools, early education centers interpret the educational eligibility and how that's all assessed and how that all works. So you can go to that document to to read about that. So this description right here is just, in general. So medical diagnosis, that's outside of the school. This is the services you may receive at home, or you have to go to the practitioners for those who are caregivers. And that's, for you, the medical practitioners, those, these are the ones that you see outside of school. Educational eligibility is all going to be about the services at school. And you see one of them says it's not required to have a medical diagnosis, but some schools, and many schools actually here in Kentucky, do require that either you have the medical diagnosis or that you're in, you're in the process of getting it, since there is a large wait time. But they're also taking into consideration a lot of other factors as well, which will be described in the ASD guidance document that I have included for you. Or when you have the PDF, you can just click on these links. Okay. So behavior, all right, which is a lot of when we do trainings, that's usually one of the big things that people want to know more about is behavior. And usually they're not talking about the desirable on-task behavior. Okay. When people say behavior, a lot of times they're talking about the challenging, socially unacceptable, even destructive behavior. But really, the word behavior is describing both desirable and undesirable behavior. And there's a reason I'm mentioning this to you. Okay. Keep in mind that the behavior of the child is really representing a few things. The level of self-regulation, and now you know what that means and what that is related to, right? All their sensory processing, their ability to cope. So that means hold it together. They may not be calming themselves down or regulating, but they're holding themselves together until they can't anymore. And we do that too, right? When those days that you go to work or go to a meeting that you have to go to and you're not feeling well, you're either exhausted, sick, you have sinuses, or something just happened right before and you're just very angry or sad, you rally for lack of a better word, like how to cope and get your system together so that when you go to that meeting or you are at work, you are doing the best you can without taking it out on everybody. But then when you get home, or maybe even before, maybe at lunch, you have to go out to the car, or you go to your favorite place and get an ice cream or your favorite drink, or go take a little bit of a nap, if you can during the day, just so that you can um, uh, when you saw that example of the cups in that video, so you can refill your cup or empty it out a little bit, depending if it's too full or if it's not full enough, so that you can self-regulate and get through the rest of the day. So again, remember, this is not just autism. This is happening to all of us. It's just with autism, they can be on a constant roller coaster up and down. And since they have that communication, they may have that communication deficit where they're not sure what words to use or how to ask for help, or even like how to describe how they're feeling, they may be just stuck in, in this. So if we can provide them with supports that enable them to be able to, first of all, learn about what's going on with their bodies, be able to help them describe and let them know it's okay to ask for help, and also be reactive to that. Okay. Supports in place. So that's what I'm talking about. It may be visual supports. This dysregulation, the best way to just for me to describe it to people, and I think that we all can relate to this, is anxiety. Okay. And a lot of kids will go into a practitioner's office and anywhere outside of home with a lot of anxiety. And a lot of it has to do with they don't know what to expect. They're not, it may be unpredictable. Maybe there are some sensory triggers in the environment and they're not sure how to tell anybody about that. So there is a lot of, so if anything increases that anxiety where they feel very, uncomfortable and they're nervous, there's more likelihood that if they can't calm themselves down or there's no supports to alleviate that anxiety, then their behavior will escalate into that fight, flight, or freeze mode. Okay. So again, like I said, we could talk about this all day, but just to let you know that when the supports are in place, and then the last one I forgot, but we just talked about specific language being used so they understand what's expected of them, what's going to happen, their questions are answered. Then they're able to be able to balance all of these others characteristics that may be affecting them, okay, and causing that anxiety. So let me tell you a little bit more about that. And I'm not going to get into a lot of detail, but I did put presentations within your resource folder that can explain a lot of this a lot more. So Teach is, some of you may have heard of Teach. It's an organization out of UNC Chapel Hill that has been studying the way that autistics learn, and understand the environments and stuff and the best supports to provide for people with autism and other disabilities, but really their focus is autism, for the past 30 years. So they have also evolved, and this is one of the lists that they come up with, the parts of learning. And again, people think this is classroom, but this is learning anything. Okay, so just learning in general, that they have difficulty with, and it can affect their ability to learn and understand and generalize the information. And that's what a lot of times what you may be seeing. So auditory processing, implicit learning, attention, multiple perspectives, executive functioning, and we're back to sensory processing. So I'm just going to go over these very general and just really call out the parts that, may affect them, and some things that may help them. So auditory processing, that's usually the first sense. The hearing is one of the first sense or parts of communication, because that's also, right, you understanding what's being said to you. That goes out the window the more escalated a person is, meaning the more anxious they become, the less that they're able to process auditory information around them. It's going to affect their able to communicate as well. But really, this has to do with the hearing and processing information. Another thing that will affect them when it comes to auditory processing is that specific language. So we don't even think about it because we say these things all the time. Like we even have like posters and t-shirts that say, be nice, be kind, behave yourself, right? Well, if a child has not been taught explicitly, meaning like told like in a list with concrete examples, what does behave yourself mean? What does be nice mean? Like, what does that look like? What behaviors are those? Okay. If they're not taught that explicitly, those terms either don't get processed at all. It won't even be processed in their brain, or it may cause even more confusion because they know that's the expectation, especially if you say it all the time, but they don't know what that looks like. What are they supposed to be doing? So just think about your language and like any general statements that you make like that. And just think about if the child looks at you with confusion or is not following through, so that you're saying that over again, maybe that you need to take a step back and really explain to the child, whether it's through a visual
Come here.
support, whether it's a visual
Kira,
support,
come here.
or examples or anything like that, or just showing them, modeling, to show them what you mean when you say certain phrases. The next one is implicit learning. This is something that a lot of children will learn just from observing, being uh, motivated by the attention of others, being motivated by wanting to get something that somebody has. So they learn the behaviors that will get them, maybe smiling at people, saying hi, a lot of those communication behaviors that we kind of expect when it comes to like toddlers and even some babies as they get older. Well, these are the behaviors that some kids with autism will miss, okay, because they have that hyper focus, and they're not aware that in order to get the attention of others, that you may need to reciprocate or initiate some type of nonverbal behavior. And so that's where a lot of any of those behaviors that children learn when they're very young, they miss out. And so when they start preschool or kindergarten, they are, a lot of times the teachers and even the caregivers, when they're observing with them with other kids, or if you go to the playground or even around other family, they may notice that they don't have these type of skills. And so it's not that they can't learn them, it's that they just need to be taught explicitly. They need to be and reinforced with praise that is saying good job, I really love the way you're doing that. Being able to reinforce with things that they like. And then the other thing that comes with implicit learning, or the difficulties with it, is that they have a hard time with generalization. So it's almost like they create a definition of how something should be, and if it changes in any way, it's hard for them to see that it's the same thing, but it just has a different characteristics. One big one is using the bathroom. This is what we hear a lot about in schools, is that the caregivers will say, yeah, oh yes, they use the bathroom at home all the time. But then when they get to school, they don't want to use the bathroom. They don't even recognize that that's a bathroom sometimes. Or they like just are very resistant to going in there. And it's because they have to learn that bathrooms can look different in different places. And so that may include a social story. So we'll get into some of the strategies, but there are different teaching strategies to help them learn that what they do in the bathroom at home, that is so familiar. And just because all that, looks different, all that's people are saying different things, like just it looks different, but that you do the same exact thing. So this may be a challenge for some of them. And then specific memory is stronger than integration of ideas. We'll talk about that in a moment. All right. With attention, they can, this is one of their strengths. They're very detail oriented, right? They have a problem seeing the big picture, and understanding the meaning, because they get really focused on details. This can cause some difficulties with multitasking and making choices. So what you can do is provide choice boards, like either write it or pictures. Difficulty multitasking, write down the steps for how to be successful at something. And then sticky attention, believe it or not, this is a real term. This is when they are so focused and engrossed in doing something that they almost block out the rest of the world, and having them transition from one thing to another, like the ending of one, beginning of another, causes total panic. And it's because they've seen in the brain how they literally get into a loop. Their brain will get into the loop, the neurotransmitters. And so a lot of things is prepping them, giving a timer. Okay, you have 5 minutes left. You'll be a lot of times the panic is they don't know when they're going to return to it. You can say, okay, you can return to it, this afternoon or whenever they can return to it, if it's an activity or a thing that they're looking at. So there's a couple of strategies that will help with that, but it's just giving them the heads up that they're going to have to transition from it. And then a lot of times it's also linking, especially at the beginning, a reinforcement, something that's motivating that they want to do as bad, they like it as much as the task that they're doing, that they can only do if they transition from it to the next activity or whatever it is that you're doing. So again, it's, giving them the prediction of knowing, that they're going to have to transition from, like, say, the iPad to something else eventually, putting them on a timer. So there's different strategies to help them support them in that transition. As far as the ideas go, here's an example. If you look at this picture, um, some people may say, like, what is, oh, here's my question. What does this look like to you guys? With all your training, with your experience in life, when you see this picture, what's the first word that pops into your brain? You can put it in the chat. Okay, chaos. Yes, that is a very common expression. So yeah, so um, an individual with autism who has not been taught explicitly like how to look at a whole picture, which may be for George what happened when he was on his teacher's lap. Okay, it may be that he was not seeing all the details in the story. He's only focusing on one detail. They will focus on the most meaningful details. So, for example, if George had been canoeing with his family over the summer, or last summer, he will look at the picture and tell you, I see rabbits canoeing. And you're like, oh, great. What else is going on? Nope. Just want to focus on the canoeing picture. So just keep in mind that you would just want to check for comprehension, make sure that they're understanding the same thing you are. And if not, then, reinforce so that they look at different sides, parts of the picture, or point out other parts of the situation so they understand. Multiple perspectives. I think that a lot of people are familiar with this one. This one is they have a hard time of putting themselves in other people's shoes. In fact, a lot of times they think that everybody in the room may know what they know. Okay. And so when somebody doesn't know it, they may be shocked by it. They may say something that may not be very nice, like shocked that this person, why don't you know that? Why haven't you done that? Just because there's that chance that they may think that everybody has the same, because it's hard for them to understand, which affects their multitasking, right? The looking and listening, those kind of things. So again, these can all be improved. They just need to be explicitly reinforced. Here's an example. You can look at this later, but basically, as a child with autism past the age of 8 may look at this cartoon, and when they ask the question, where will Sally look for her ball? They will say in the box, because they think that Sally knows everything that they know as a person reading the comment, right? And a person who understands that Sally was outside the room, so she doesn't know that Anne moved the ball, may say that it's in the basket. So just look at that a little bit when you look at it, because I'm gonna executive functioning, that has a lot to do with a lot of us. I think any teenager has a challenge with this. Kids do, right? Time, sequencing activities, concept of finished, need organizational skills, again, explicitly taught, reinforced with meaningful reinforcement, checklists. Self-regulation is under this. So here's the sensory processing. Okay, that's also falls under executive functioning skills. So we know that when they become overstimulated, the meltdowns, right? You saw from George's video, he says that when he walks into a room, he hears all these different sounds at once. And we know that that is true. We've seen in the brain, it's hard for them to filter out all the different sounds. It may take them a moment, or they may need some prompting to help them understand, who they're supposed to focus on or where they're supposed to focus on, because they see all these different stimuli, or whether it's sounds, smells, people talking, people blowing their nose, all coming at them at once. So it may affect them in being able to understand who to pay attention to, and therefore they may not hear instructions, they may not go to the right place. So again, visual supports will help, because that will help them know where to focus. Dealing with open space, anxiety, we know that open space, just because it's structured, the more an environment or an activity is structured, the more it's predictable, they know what to do, they know how to be successful. Okay, I'm not going to play this video or the next 2 videos, but I want you to go in and listen to Amethyst. Amethyst is a self-advocate. She has vlogs about all different topics to do with autism. This one, she talks about having the sensory processing disorder and how she carries around a kit. It has earplugs, chewing gum. Sometimes she brings her baseball cap because of the lights overstimulate, sunglasses. She wears sunglasses there. And she just talks about what it's like to have that. So, and then stemming too. Stemming helps them self-regulate right? Stemming, whatever the behavior is, almost gives a clue to the rest of us what sense is being overstimulated. Like we may hear the voice, children start humming or singing or saying words over and over again, or they, and that may be because they want to control the sound because something is overstimulating their hearing, their auditory sense, and they can't control it. So they try to control it with their own voice. So that all those, the stemming is a way for them to self-regulate and also give us a clue that there may be something in environment that is challenging them. Functions of behavior. So for the behavior, you can see that a lot of the times we know that it can be sensory, like we've been talking about, escape, attention, and tangibles. And if we can figure out when a child has say one of those undesirable behaviors, what they're trying to tell us. Are they trying to escape because of sensory? Are they trying to escape just because they're tired? Or are they just got really mad because they don't understand what's going on? What are words? What would you have rather them told you? Or if they are non-speaking, sign to you or point to you, what would you rather them told you than running away or throwing a toy, or for the attention purposes, screaming or pulling on you, tangibles, grabbing things out of people's hands? What would you have rather done? Because we know at this point that all communication is a form of behavior. So all their behaviors is a way of them communicating to you. And they probably have learned to do that behavior because they get instant attention, or that it meets their need instantly because of your reaction to it. So if you would like for them to use a different behavior, then teaching them how to do that would help them. And this is called functional communication training, or some. So I've been mentioning some of the strategies or interventions. These are all inside this EBP report, which you can find in the resource folder. Okay. That's very user friendly. This is the 28 evidence-based practices. Don't become overwhelmed. A lot of them are ones that you already know. If anything, you would just want to fine tune your skills. And then maybe some that you actually have thought would work, but you didn't know how to implement it. And this would help you. And where you would find, well, I'm sorry, this is the foundational 5. We talk in our KTC, there are the foundational, which kind of helps you with the rest, but really it has to do with what's going to be what you need to learn to help use your teach your client or your child, so that when you see behavior, you think of more of desirable behavior. You're like, okay, I need to do this in order to help my child have more desirable or client have more desirable behavior, instead of being frustrated by their undesirable behavior. And this is a video from ASAN, which is autism. Oh shoot. Oh yeah, autism. I put it up there. Autism Self Advocate Network. And they have a video. It's like a welcome video to the autism community. You can just click on this picture, but the one that I had planned to show you, if I hadn't gone off on some tangents, is they want everyone to be welcomed, and they have an acronym for that. And when you watch it, you'll see that it's really just learning what the coping skills, the strategies, how to self-advocate, because they're talking to the person with autism. So definitely a good perspective to have. And to learn more about anything that I talked about today, I put a resource page. You can go to KTC. We have the sensory processing. We have caregiver summits. We have a lot of information for you. The Affirm, that is totally UNC Chapel Hill, and they have modules, and they can go into any of the evidence-based practices that you saw, any of the interventions I mentioned. Iris Center is another one, and Ocali up in Ohio has a lot of great ones for the things that are not evidence-based practices, but you really want to know about because it's different, like puberty and autism. Like, what does that look like? What communication supports and what kind of supports do you need there? So a lot of different topics on there. And with that said, hopefully Heidi put the link or type something in. If you don't mind taking our survey, if you want any professional development credit, you'll need to take the survey. So please click on that link so you can be able to get that, also to help us to know what other sessions you would like us to provide so you can learn more about it. And I think that is it. I know I just made it, huh? I hope I just made it. I didn't look at the clock. Just know that I put a lot of other resources that I didn't even get to mention. I put them in the resource folder. So when you go to the resource folder, just click on everything and just see what I put in there. Some of them are just Google Docs, like with information on there that I really think is important for you to know.
Thank you, Enid. It's just so much information. It's wonderful information that it's easy just to keep talking and share. So we appreciate this wonderful information.